Every American deserves to be informed. Every American deserves to come to their own conclusion. Welcome to Fill in the Blanks, where we cut through the noise and get to the heart of what's going on in the world of politics. I'm your host, Walter Blanks Jr., and in this show, facts will meet perspective. Just 12 hours before session started, I had the opportunity to sit down with Governor Bill Lee as we discussed everything from school choice, immigration reform, and sex trafficking here in the state. Let's hear from the governor as he reflects on his tenure in office and what he sees is the future of Tennessee. So, Governor, thank you so much for allowing us to sit here and have a pretty wide conversation about where the state of Tennessee is and where you envision it going over the next couple of years. But before we get into all of that, can you share one of your most impactful days as governor and why was it so impactful for you?
Yeah, there's been so many impactful days. It's hard to pick one or two out. Certainly the days of COVID were impactful, and some of the decisions that we had to make with so little information that had such enormous implications. Sitting around the table here in the residence with our team when we knew that the economy was collapsing and making a decision to zero out the budget increases entirely so that we could be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. That was a impactful moment. That was really important. But there have been others. We're talking a lot about school choice today. I do remember, meeting with and talking to a single mom in Memphis who, because we had passed education savings accounts, her child was given the ability to go to a school that, in her view, would change her kid's life. And I remember talking to her about that and the passion that she had for her own child's well-being, and remembering that when we get into these kinds of policy issues, we're not talking about policy, we're talking about a kid or a family or a life changed forever. And when you have those conversations, then you turn around and you have resolve and you have passion to continue to, charge ahead in spite of the opposition, because you know firsthand that you're changing a kid's life. That was impactful. There have been a lot of moments that this job has been a huge honor to be a part of. It's a challenge, obviously. It's a job that it requires a lot of energy and a lot of time, a lot of passion. There's a lot of controversy around issues, but staying focused on the individual people that are being helped.
Yeah. So to spring forward a little bit, let's talk about, of course, why we're here. Yep. Right. Of course, school choice has been a priority for you. The last two sessions, but really your entire term as governor. As someone who's benefited from school choice, I've seen firsthand those kind of positive impacts that can be had on students who really don't have any other way out of whether it's their neighborhood or to live a better life. Share with us how you first got started fighting and advocating for school choice and why you are so passionate about it.
And you mentioned that we've worked a lot the last couple of years. Actually, in my first State of the State address, I said, we ought to have education savings accounts this year when I first came into office. And I had a lot of advice not to do that first year because it was such a hard thing to do, but it passed, as you know. It had to be changed, and it ended up being just for 3 school districts. But it was hugely important to me coming in. It's one of the reasons I ran for governor. And it started for me 15, 16, 17 years ago, long before I even thought about running for governor. And I was working with at-risk kids in an inner city youth program. I met a kid and I became engaged in particular with that one kid, decided to mentor that child and go through a formal mentoring process with him. really spent basically an evening a week, every week for 5 years with this child. And when I first met him, he was failing every subject in his school. And I just over time became more and more aware of the disparities that exist, especially for those kids in the inner city. And it's broader than that, but that's where it started for me, was that group of kids and the lack of opportunity that I saw that they had. And I knew that there was a way to change that. And it started my interest in charter schools and understanding the difference in public schools. It fueled a desire for me to give these kids more options, more pathways, more chances. And that's really how it started, was working with inner city kids some 15, 16 years ago. And I've increasingly become passionate about the ability that kids have to find a path forward that works for them.
Yeah. So take a step back. This isn't a question for Governor Lee. It's for Bill Lee, right?
Yeah,
As a father,
yeah.
as a grandfather, how important is it for children and parents to have that flexibility in their education to choose whatever may work best for them?
So as a father, I had my kids at different times in my life in public school, in a homeschool environment, in a private school, because there were different stages of life and different children that had different needs. I had the ability and the resources to make those choices. I was asked even today from someone, don't we have school choice? People can choose to go to private school if they want to. And I said, well, we have school choice for the wealthy. We have school choice for people who can afford to choose a private school for their kid because they think it's the best option. It has maybe there's a unique need there. But we don't have choices for the vast majority of Tennesseans. And as a father, I knew that it was, critical for my children to have different options and to experience a different pathway because they were all different in different stages of life. I kind of found myself thinking, wouldn't it be nice if everybody had that choice? Wouldn't it be nice if an inner city kid or a rural kid or a kid with special needs or a kid that has a unique, situation at home or at school, wouldn't it be nice if there were some options for that child so that they could find the path forward? And that's really what this is about for me.
Yeah, and I've watched Session over the past few years, and it seems that there are a lot of conversations around the actual policy, right? How it would function, how it would work. And more often than not, as I always say, that when politics are played, kids are left out in the cold. And I believe that you've done a tremendous job of highlighting those real life stories of people who are currently benefiting, could potentially benefit if expanded. How important is it to you to have communities and parents involved in a child's educational journey?
Policy, you mentioned policy. So policy is very important. You got to have the right kind of policy in order to have the kind of outcomes that you want. It's really important that we create an overall academic educational environment that includes everyone. That's public schools and private schools and homeschools and the entire educational system that we have in our state. So the policy has to be built to support all of those efforts. But the policy as a fundamental underpinning has to focus on the children. And if you're going to focus on the children, then you have to focus on the parents, because the parents care more about the children than anyone. The parents know more about their kids than anyone. So as we develop policy, we ought to develop policy that takes into account, first and foremost, the parents' desires for their kid, and then build that policy around that that fundamental belief that parents know best. The government doesn't know best. The government should create policy that allows the one who knows best to find the best path forward. And that's why when we create policy, as we've done with this legislation, we understand that the vast majority of kids are going to be in our public school system. So first and foremost, we have to support and strengthen and advocate for our public schools. That's where most of our kids are going to be educated. That's where the biggest piece of the future of Tennessee lies in the education of the kids through public schools. So I thought the funding formula was poorly constructed. It'd been 30 years since we had changed it. So a couple years ago, we passed the Tennessee Investment in Student Achievement, the TISA Act, and it changed the way we funded schools, focused on the children and on the dollars attached to children in public schools. We put $1 billion in our public school system that same year to jumpstart and to restart appropriate funding for public schools. So we've made by far the most significant investments in public school dollars since we came in. My belief is that we ought to fully strengthen our public schools and give parents the choice at the same time. If we can do that, that is policy that puts parents at the forefront of that policy. So then a parent has an option. You don't just have the option to go to the public school, which we're working to make the best possible. But if that option might not be the best choice for you, then you ought to have another option. And that's really what school choice is. It's saying to a family, rather than saying to them, you have one choice, the public school that you're zoned for or that you're assigned to. That's one option. Or we say to them, you have a couple of choices. You can go to the public school that you're assigned to, and we're going to do everything we can to make that the best school possible. But we're going to give you another choice too. Your taxpayer dollars can be spent on the public school, or we can give you your taxpayer dollars to spend on a private school. That way the parent drives the decision, but the policy supports the entire educational system. So those choices can be good. They can be difficult because you've got to choose between these two, but at least you have an option and a choice. That's what we should do with policy.
And I think that's super important, especially when you look at our entire society, right? I spend 30 minutes trying to find something to watch on TV, streaming, because there's so many options. I eventually land on something, like Seinfeld or, whatever the case may be. But that's the society that we live in now, where you have as many options as you want. You can order a car exactly the way you want it. It's completely unique. It's yours. And I believe that as a whole, our educational system no longer reflects the society that we live in today. And a lot of families are realizing, you mentioned coming out of the pandemic, that there is more out there and there's more that's attainable for them. And so I think that's super important. And thinking about policy, thinking about your role as governor, how has your faith impacted your perspective on not just education reform, but just how you lead as governor in general?
Well, I think it's, if your faith, my faith is the most important thing in my life. It's the most component. It doesn't mean that I'm a perfect guy or that I do everything right or that I'm not flawed or broken, because I am. My faith actually resolves that issue for me. But your faith being a part of who you are and the way you think. Most importantly, my faith informs me that loving my neighbor as myself and serving them as such it drives my efforts, right? So my faith tells me and informs me and inspires me to live my life in a way that impacts people around me for good. Use your life to make life better for someone else. It was a faith-based inner-city at-risk youth program that I was working in and it wasn't just about education. It was about all kinds of needs for these kids. It was that faith-based organization that led me to the children and the work with those children that caused me to look at this one component of their life, which was education, and say, we could do better for them. We could give them a better alternative so that they might have a better outcome, so that their life might be better because we leaned into policy, as it were, that would affect their life. I think my faith, because it drives this desire to serve other people, it shapes everything that I do. It touches everything that I do. It motivates me in ways that inform everything that I do in my role as governor.
And so thinking about that and thinking about all the work that you've done in education reform, how do you want your legacy to be remembered, not just with school choice, but with the current education system as a whole in the state?
Well, I think people's lives are impacted profoundly by their education. I mean, we all know that. Opportunity is oftentimes, there are a lot of things in a kid's life that impact ultimately their success, as it were, their ability to live the life that they want to live. But education is a crucially important component of that. To the degree that we can impact the access to opportunity through an education system for a kid, then we have given them the ability to change their life and to more likely live the life that they would choose for themselves. At the end of the day, the more choices we give people, and you talked about choices, the more choices we give people, the more likely it is they're going to access what they want for their life. Mm-hmm. And the less we will, control or dictate how their life turns out. And when you look at the difference between America and other countries around the world, America's sort of based on this concept that individuals should be given an equal opportunity to live the life that they want to access freedom and opportunity, and we should do that in our education system.
And so now to switch gears a little bit, you've been multifaceted, dealing with a lot of different things as governor. I'd like to switch over to some things that necessarily don't get talked about as much, but still on the minds of a lot of Tennesseans. Yeah. We're seeing an uptick in illegal immigration, crime in certain areas, and even the increase of human trafficking. There was a big case, a couple of days ago, last week, in Antioch. From your perch, what is, or yourself or the legislature, doing to combat some of those things?
Well, you crossed a few issues there, and human trafficking is a heartbreaking and a tragic situation that happens around the world. It's a global issue. It is something that we think oftentimes in other countries, but it's happening right here at home. I mean, like you said, in Antioch, human trafficking ring that was broken up there. We've done a lot of work in understanding more clearly what human trafficking is in America, how it looks in America, what the best ways to attack it are in this country. And we've put significant funding toward not only our efforts in TBI and bolstering their ability to intercept, to understand, to find the criminal activity around human trafficking. We've strengthened that, but we've also worked significantly with partners on the ground. There are a lot of times there are partners that are targeted to attack a particular issue. Mm-hmm. And these partners know well how it works, what the system is for this particular crime, and how best to attack it. So we've actually developed strong partnerships with some of these, Tim Tebow's organization, HerSong, the Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition here in Tennessee, partnered with them because they have the understanding and the boots on the ground. And we've done some real work there to try to curb the scourge of human trafficking in Tennessee. It is a serious problem, but it is one that we've made some pretty strong efforts, and we're beginning to see some fruit from that. You talked about illegal immigration, and human trafficking was one of the real human casualties of the open border.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of human trafficking that has happened in the last several years as we've had movement from cartels, from trafficking organizations, not only of drugs, but of humans across the border. It's a tragedy. It is a human tragedy. And oftentimes that trafficking is children, it's young girls, and then it's also just women in general. And that's been vastly exacerbated by the border policies of the last several years. We all know about criminal activity that's happened, and that has manifested itself in ways that are happening, unfortunately, in every state in the country. The drug crisis, the fentanyl deaths that have occurred in every state in the country and have been significantly increased as the easy flow of drugs across the border has happened. So the border crisis has many facets that are devastating to our society. And I think that's why the American people have been so strongly in favor of policies proposed by President Trump, recognizing that if we don't stop the traffic of humans and drugs and crime, if we don't stop that at our border, it becomes unsustainable. And we're already seeing that in some places. But fortunately, the American people were very forceful in their messaging on Election Day as it relates to that issue. And I think we're headed in the right direction.
And so thinking about your tenure as governor, what are some things that you were super passionate about but was not able to spend a ton of time on? Things that you wish you could have spent more time on during your
Well, we
term?
focused on the things that seemed to be most urgent at the time, right? The GIVE Act was one of the first initiatives we passed in the beginning when I first came into office, the governor's investment in vocational education. Very passionate about that. Grew up and worked all my working career with skilled tradespeople, understanding we don't have enough vocational education. We don't have enough technical agricultural education in our system. This too is a choice, right? It is a pathway for success for a lot of kids who wouldn't take the traditional route in our education system, but might choose CTE programs of all varieties. So, we hit vocational education, we hit school choice. I worked on criminal justice reform, and we passed the Success and Reentry Act and Alternatives to Incarceration Act, something that I had been working on for 25 years in prison reentry work before I came here. So those things were crucial in the beginning. Always focusing on fiscal responsibility. One of the number one jobs of a governor is to bring forth a budget every year that is good stewardship as it relates to the taxpayers' dollars. So focusing on that, those are the things that we've tried to implement in the educational issues we've talked about. But just in the last year or two, we've put a renewed focus on conservation. We have natural resources that we have to conserve, and we have to preserve, and we have to balance things like protecting the Duck River. People have heard me talk about that because it's one of the most biologically diverse streams in North America, but it has a lot of pressure on the river because of the needs for water for development in a fast developing state like ours. That's an issue that is not easy to solve. And we are, at this point in my administration, we're putting great efforts toward that. The Farmland Preservation Bill, another one. We lose 9 acres an hour of farmland in Tennessee. Ag is our number one economic driver. How do you balance development with farmland preservation. There are ways to do it. It's difficult, but that's what the farmland preservation bill is about. So I think the things that we're working on now, obviously we're working on educational issues. We'll continue to work on transportation, continue to work on infrastructure. But conservation is something that's really important to the next generations of Tennesseans. And we're working hard to get that done before the next 2 years is up.
Yeah, and how would you recommend future administrations to pick up where you left off and continue that work?
You know, I ran a company for 25 years, and I think we had a continuous improvement plan every year. We had a strategic planning effort every year. We took stock of where we were. The company was continuously changing. It was continuously growing. It faced new challenges as the market changed, as customers' interests changed. So we had to change as a company continuously to stay ahead of and to anticipate what our customers needed and how we were going to meet those needs and how our company's growth was going to be funded. I think the state is very much like that. We don't ever get it done. Mm-hmm. We don't ever, it's one of we talked a lot about school choice. That's not the end all. There is a never-ending effort. There should be a never-ending effort to look at where we are, where the future is, what's changing, and how it is that we adapt to that. That's true for transportation. It's true for education. It's true for energy. It's true for pretty much any issue that we've addressed in the so far 6 years that I've been here. Those issues will have to continue to be addressed. Mm-hmm. And so the next administration, hopefully what we will have done is what needed to be done for the day, anticipating 20 years from now. I mean, we're doing things today that I think we'll look at 20 years from now and be glad that we put in place. But the next administration is going to take what we've done, just like I would at a strategic planning meeting for our company or a continuous improvement process plan where you say, all right, how do we make this education system even better? How do we make our transportation system even better? There was a business book called Good to Great, mm-hmm. and it talked about the fundamental idea of taking what you have and making it better. I suspect that'll be day one for the next administration.
And you're gearing up for session. A lot of things going on, a lot of different parts moving 1,000 miles per hour. What is one message that you want to send out to all Tennesseans?
You know, I spoke to some legislative interns today who are just coming in. They'll be helping individual legislators across the state. I think what I would say to Tennesseans is the heart of most every legislator and the heart of the governor and the heart of our staff and the heart of our team, the heart is that we are by and large making every effort we can to create an environment where people can thrive. Our business had a mission statement, and that part of that mission statement was we exist to create an environment where our employees can thrive, personally and professionally. Government can't. Government doesn't create jobs. Government doesn't do a lot of things that people think they should be doing. And government isn't the answer to the greatest challenges we have in our day. The government is not the solver of the problems. The people are. But the government can create an environment for the people. Yeah. They can inhibit or they can, create an environment of success for the people when they want to engage in addressing the greatest issues of the day. The government can be a helper, they can be a hindrance. Our job is to create an environment where Tennesseans, every Tennessean, I want every Tennessean to have access to a better way of life. I want to create an economic environment that works for all Tennesseans, and an education system that works for all, and a transportation system that works for all. I think that's the heart of most public servants, is to serve the people that they have been elected to represent. And I think that's true for most. I think there's a lot of political toxicity. There's a lot of political gamesmanship. There are vast differences in opinion about how best to create that environment and what that environment should look like. But I think we have shared desire. I tend to be a person who, I talk about disagreeing better, recognizing the dignity of every human being, even those that really disagree with you, and that might be on the ideological opposite side of an issue that you are. Their opinion and their beliefs have as much value as mine do, and their dignity is just as great as mine. And recognizing that and remembering it allows me to engage in discourse that's, I think, more productive, knowing that they want the same thing I do most of the time. We want the same thing. We just have a different idea about how to get there.
Well, Governor, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and good luck to you in session.
Thank you. Thanks for the work you do every day.
Of course.